Sacred geometry. Sacred geometry. What an irksome name. Certainly, many atheists will find the descriptor sacred troubling, the stain of an unacceptable supernatural patina. By contrast, the deeply religious are likely to reject the subject as potentially blasphemous, bordering on the occult. For the vast majority of us, it is probably the geometry part that brings back bad memories of high school. Wait, what's the difference again between a postulate and a theorem? As for me, sacred geometry is a subject I love to study, and I very much enjoy teaching. It's just as well. One cannot get very far in the mastery of any traditional craft of architecture without it. Of course, there exist many sacred geometry traditions that developed independently around the world. However, it is interesting to discover how incredibly connected they all appear to be. This can largely be explained by the understanding that sacred geometry is an empirical study, the observed object being nature, the observing subject man. I'll focus briefly on the Western tradition having its origins in ancient Egypt and Greece, expanded upon by the Romans, medieval Europe, and Islam. The Quadrivium. During the medieval period, the classical education was apportioned into 7 arts liberales, the studies that would prepare a freeman to be a beneficial contributor to society. The first 3, called the trivium, were as follows: grammar, the mechanics of language; logic or dialectic, the mechanics of thought; rhetoric, the use of grammar and logic to instruct or persuade. These trivium were the lesser studies, trivial if you prefer. They were to prepare one for the serious studies of the Quadrivium: arithmetic, number and concept; geometry, number and space; harmony, number in time or sequence; cosmology, the dynamic study of number in time and space. In our modern, hyper-rational educational system, a disproportionate emphasis is placed on the purely conceptual approach to number, the least instinctive and humanistic of the 4, and perhaps why most students dread math, in my opinion. Polynomial long division, anyone? Sacred geometry encompasses all aspects of number in a balanced way. Where to begin in such a potentially all-encompassing subject? Simply at the beginning, by encompassing everything. Oneness, unity. The universe, literally uni, one, verso, turn of the divine compass that creates everything. It is the Big Bang, the pebble in the pond, the point of singularity that expands ever outward. It's also gravity that pulls us ever inward. Geometrically, it is fundamentally represented by the point. Now, a pencil point really is, under a magnifying glass, a little mountain of graphite in 3-dimensional space. However, if you give it some thought, a true point doesn't physically exist. It is location without dimension, a metaphysical concept. It represents the center of the emanation, the outward manifestations of which are the circle and the sphere. Tunas Division. Significantly, for ancient peoples, numbers were not just abstract integers used for crunching numbers. Number was deeply imbued with meaning. For example, there certainly was a concept of two-ness, not just how much was 2, but rather, what does 2 mean? If 1 already represents everything, 2 could not be possibly a multiple of oneness. Rather, the solution was that 2 represented a division of unity. Cell division is a clear example of the division of unity. For example, a fertilized human cell contains all the information needed to generate another human. Often this two-ness manifests itself in difference, polar opposition. Light, darkness, heat, cold, good, evil. Yet duality has an inherent sense of incompleteness and tension, an underlying desire to return to unity that generates attraction, positive-negative, body-mind, male-female. One of its geometrical representations is the line, the connection of 2 points, the concept of distance, a metaphysical separation from unity, the source of the emanation. Threeness, multiplicity. Many ancient languages have a singular case, a dual case specifically referring to 2 people, and a plural case to represent 3 or more. Essentially, 1, 2, many. So it was that threeness was seen as a way to break through separation and duality that would lead to multiplicity. Father, mother, children. Interestingly, our English words for father and mother come directly from the Latin words pater and mater, respectively. We likewise have inherited the words pattern and matter from the same roots and nature from natura, something born. Just as father and mother beget children, so too pattern imposed upon matter gives birth to all of nature. 3 was also seen as a way through or a method to bind 2 polar opposites. This principle is embodied in our legal system. Where a conflict exists, a plaintiff brings a complaint against a defendant. There is a provision of arbitration by a third party, such as a judge or jury, that allows for a resolution. Geometrically, with 3 points we begin to conceptually enclose space. A triangle forms the metaphysical concept of the plane. Fourness, materialization. Finally, we have moved from the conceptual to physical manifestation. With a location, length, breadth, and height, volume is enclosed. A material object can exist in 3-dimensional space. The most efficient way to enclose 3-dimensional space is the tetrahedron, or 4-sided pyramid. This results in an extremely stable structure, the first of the Platonic solids, commonly found in nature as an organizing principle of extremely strong crystalline forms such as quartz or diamond. Likewise, associated with the square and the cube, fourness conveys a deep sense of stability and connection to the earth. Why geometry literally means metria, the measure of Gaia, Mother Earth. So that we divide and orient our land according to the 4 cardinal directions, traditionally forming quarters in our cities. So having journeyed from emanation to physical manifestation, what could possibly be left? The most enigmatic of them all, worthy of its own consideration, 5-ness, the number of life, reproduction, and regeneration.